Hi, and welcome to our next coffee talk. Again, we are trying to break out little pieces of the best practices for inclusional education and make them digestible so that you know how to contribute on that third domain, which is parent participation and relation with the school. So thank you. I'm glad that you're here. I'm Sassafras Moore, and I'm going to let Ginger take it from here.
Thank you. And I'm Ginger Manley. I am another parent trainer with Poppin. And this is our second coffee talk. And like Sassafras said, we are taking these pieces of our inclusion webinar and just breaking them down to share some additional information and better explain what each of these concepts mean so that you as parents have a better understanding of what those are, to allow you to more meaningfully participate and to be able to utilize these in your teaching of your student, whether it's during homework time, or if you are homeschooling, or if you are helping your student, if your student is doing the Florida virtual classes, or whether they're in brick and mortar. We all still in this time of COVID, we still are the teachers for our students to an extent that we never have been before. And so this is just really important information and useful information for us to know. So Sassafras, talk to me about, I know what flexible grouping is, and I actually love this concept. So talk to us about what that is though, and how that's utilized in the classroom.
So when we're thinking about flexible grouping, we're looking at putting children together to help reinforce the learning. So if we match with one child that has a really good grasp of this concept, they're going to learn it on a whole nother level. You know, there's this whole thing about like, if you can explain it, you really know it. And it is cemented because it's a higher level of learning. And then we pair them with a child that, you know, maybe this isn't their strongest area, but maybe we have them do an art project to show comprehension, and they're an amazing artist. Through flexible grouping, we give children the chance to see that there are multiple different intelligences. And if we're looking at just one whole person, I'll use me for an example. I'm very good with verbal linguistics. I am amazing, amazing, amazing on that end. I have dyscalculia. I am very bad at math. It takes me twice as long because I have lower processing speed in that domain. And so I grew up in the 80s, and I was literally told that I just wasn't applying myself in math. And that was not the case. But if I could have been paired, you know, maybe during reading time with a struggling reader, I could have been compassionate and helped them through. And maybe that same person actually would have been good at math and could maybe return that favor. When we're mixing groupings, and I do not mean the cliche way of the past, I don't know how much this still goes on, but I know when I was younger, they color coded like reading groups, you know, and you had like green, and they were, you know, like amazing advanced readers, you know, people like me who are verbal linguistics masters. And then you have your, you know, purple layer, and that's the people that are kind of like your intermediary. And then you have like your red layer or whatever the color they said. And it was your struggling readers. And, you know, this cute color situation did not fool children. We figured out who was good at what and who was not that great in that particular domain. But because there was such a focus on that verbal linguistics, and there was never a chance to flip it and show, well, you know what? But this person is a wonderful artist. Like, I can't draw at all either because I'm not a visual person. You know, verbal linguistics, great. Math down here, spatial reasoning down here, art skills way down here. Intelligence isn't just a straight across the board, you're good at everything. And that is the biggest lie, and it has hurt children for many, many, many years in education. So instead of having those awful 3-level groups, we change it and we show them, you're good at this, I'm good at that. people are inherently different. Go ahead, Ginger, sorry.
Well, I just was going to say, that's a really great example. And just within my own home, I can tell you, I've got 2 boys with special needs, and their needs are very, very different. What they're good at are different, or is different. What they struggle in is different. The way they process information is different. The way they verbalize that information is different. All of it's different. It's very, very different. And they have, within their own group of being brothers and being stuck in this house together during COVID and any other time, and every time we move, because we're a military family, and every time we've moved, they always have that group of each other. So no matter where we go, they've got that. And so they themselves have figured out that flexible grouping and that logic behind it, and how to access that and utilize it, because one is really good in some areas and one is better in the other, and they fill in each other's gaps, and they can help each other with what's difficult, and they've found those ways to explain to each other so that they're understanding it on their levels in ways I never will be able to do that. And so so that's one example, because they are doing that, and they are filling in the gaps of each other, and be like, okay, Ian, you this is hard for you, so I'm going to do this, but you do this really well, so you do this, and they can accomplish whatever task that they're doing. So that's one example. And then another example, just from the parent side, that I've seen again with my own children in school, and things that we have written into the IEPs for my children, and my oldest in particular, is this flexible grouping or a peer tutor? And that kind of falls along in that same line. So my oldest has always been in general education classrooms, always, but he's had pullouts into different subjects, in those areas that he needs. But one of the services and supports that we put in place that we figured out works for him is, apparently both of my children respond really well to bossy little girls. I don't know where they get that from. Probably not their mom for all these years, but they respond well to bossy little girls, and especially when they were younger. And my oldest definitely did. And so we figured that out. And so we paired him in school on numerous occasions, but one in particular for 2 different school years. We paired him with this sweet little boy named Jasmine, who had a brother with autism as well. So she fully understood some of those uniqueness and different things that Ian did, and paired her with him. And she taught him so much. And she had such a level of patience and a way in doing that he learned things that he never would have learned otherwise. And she would pull him along with her into different socialization areas in learning, hey, Ian, you need to focus, we're reading now. And he'd be like, oh yeah, I gotta pay attention. And then he'd get back into what he's doing and do that. Or she'd show him a way that worked for her, and in her patience and showing that, he kind of adapted that into what did work for him. So her method maybe didn't all the way work, but she was showing him another way than what the teacher was or what he had known before. And he just excelled so much. So those are just a couple examples from the parent side of how my own children can benefit from flexible grouping and using that, versus, and then you were sharing those examples of what that looks like in the classroom. So as a parent, give me an example of flexible grouping if we're homeschooling or tutoring our student with homework. How can we use that in that aspect versus in the classroom?
Well, that's gonna be dependent on the availability of other children. Right. So it could be in a buddy situation where perhaps if the child has, dyslexia or a visual or spatial tracking issue or diminished sight, maybe you're having an older child that's reading the passage, because what you're looking for is to test comprehension at this point. Did they understand the passage? Well, having other children around could certainly reduce that, because if we're not testing for fluency, we're not testing for, phonemic awareness, the ability to synthesize words. We're just testing for comprehension. Did they read this article about rocks and can they answer the questions? If you have another partner that can, allow for those accommodations, or even having the accommodation of having oral responses, maybe for whatever reason, whether it could be anything from a physical issue like cerebral palsy or muscular dystrophy, where you're unable to use your hands, or even autism, where you're not getting the feedback to appropriately be able to use your fine motor skills, any number of reasons. So you can bring in that oral part, where it's like, okay, well, we're going to get in a small group and we're going to talk, we're going to each, read this passage or do this activity. And we're going to either have each of you take a turn talking about it or producing some project that shows, knowledge. So it's a little harder, with homework, because that is going to be dependent on whether you have access to other children. So, but it would be a universal concept that would work in any, in any scenario, whether it's at home or at school or wherever. We know that children learn from other children.
So we've talked about kind of pairing. Talk about another aspect of flexible, how that can be used in a classroom.
Well, one of the ways that it can be used in the classroom, is one of the key things about flexible grouping is that you don't use the old style, like you have the purple, green, the red, the whatever groups in there, static. By constantly switching up the groupings, by looking at the different multiple intelligences, you're teaching children compassion. This is inclusion at its core. And then we're not even talking about necessarily disabilities. So when we're talking about the BPIE, one of the indicators for inclusional education is, are the teachers utilizing this? Are they mixing up these groupings? Are they just using, where it's, so there's two different ways to teach, right? There is teacher-led, and then there is teacher-directed. And teacher-directed is really nice because it allows children to come into their own understanding. And when they teach each other, they learn so many things. If you're the one that's better at the topic, you're, cementing your knowledge like way up the Bloom's taxonomy scale. If you're the person that needs help, you're learning that, it's okay to acknowledge that you're having this issue, because we're all not good at the same things. So, there's just so many, reasons to do this. But the actual, the grouping, that can be done in any way. It can be changed, morning, afternoon. It could be done by subject area. It could be done by ability. But you want to just be sure that you're constantly mixing those up and making them, different levels, and pairing people with different people. And then too, I've used it in a typical classroom to make sure that children who didn't naturally draw to each other, you kind of observe who's on the playground and doing this and whatever. I have definitely deliberately created groups based on, race differences or gender differences or whatever the case may be, so that these different types of people, so it doesn't even have to inherently just be that academic domain. It could be about communication too. If you have a child that is, unable to communicate or is very, very shy, and you have somebody that's me, like who's like super boisterous and loud and would like, but patient and kind, and they can whisper to me and I'll scream it at everybody for them. There's so many different ways to look at this grouping, and in every way it benefits everybody, including the teacher, because we know that kids learn better this way. So that, you know, her task is being completed, you know, and they're taking, and another thing about grouping, just to say one last thing, it puts accountability into the kids. They see that they're a part of this environment and that they're always respected and they're always supported. And they learn to really honor each other's like strengths and needs. And I mean, it's just amazing.
It really gives them a level of, for lack, I guess, lack of a better word, buy-in, you know, for
Yes.
buy-in to their learning, to their relationships with others, like you said, and having that trust with everyone that they're encountering. This allows them to have that because they do have that back and forth, and you know, other people are filling in those gaps or those deficits that they may have, whether it's that they have a disability or not. We all have our, you know, challenges in how we interact with others or how we learn and how we participate. And flexible grouping in even just your everyday life. I know when you were giving examples, I was thinking, I'm like, I do that every single day in some form or another, and pulling people in and doing things. And so it is a very important concept. So again, this is something too that can be written in different ways into a student's IEP. So this concept itself is a that can be used in your student's IEP to help them be successful, to help them learn, and to help them utilize their strengths and kind of get rid of some of their weaknesses in using this type of grouping. So again, we have a great resource sheet with a lot of information, and we've pulled a lot of different resources on flexible grouping. So we would encourage you to access that and look at that. And if we can answer any questions, please feel free to reach out to either Sassafras and myself or any of our colleagues. We would be happy to answer those questions. So thanks for being here with us. We appreciate it, and join us for our next upcoming coffee talk.
Thank you. Bye.